The automated door to my apartment hissed open, revealing not the expected maintenance bot, but a creature that looked like it had wandered straight out of a fever dream. Or, more accurately, a very detailed documentary about alien life forms that I'd once watched, half asleep, on the Galactic Cable Channel. My name is Ben, and I'm not easily surprised. I've translated ancient Sumerian love poems and deciphered the mating calls of long-extinct space slugs. But this was beyond my pay grade. Standing in my doorway was a being that could only be described as iridescent. Smooth, almost amphibian-like skin shimmered with a soft, internal glow, shifting between hues of emerald and sapphire as it moved. Two large, expressive eyes, currently the color of warm amber, regarded me with an unnerving intensity. And instead of arms, it had four flexible, tentacle-like appendages that writhed and coiled with a grace that was both fascinating and deeply unsettling. This, I assumed, was my new roommate. "Hello?" I managed, my voice sounding a bit higher pitched than usual. "You must be the new resident?" The creature tilted its head, the motion fluid and mesmerizing. "Affirmative. I am ZY Elthara. You are designated as the primary inhabitant of this domicile?" Its voice was a melodious baritone, each syllable precisely articulated, with a slight, almost robotic, cadence. It sounded like a synthesizer that had spent way too much time in a library. Yeah, that's me. Ben Carter." I extended my hand, a gesture I'd always thought was universal. Turns out, I was wrong. ZY Elthara stared at my outstretched hand as if it were an alien specimen under a microscope. Its amber eyes narrowed slightly, then shifted to a cool, calculating blue. "This, appendage-to-appendage contact. Is it a local mating ritual?" It asked with a complete lack of emotion, the tone suggesting the possibility of some sort of unsanitary, possibly deadly, infection. No, not at all," I stammered, quickly retracting my hand. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck. "It's a greeting. A way to say hello. Like, friendly. It's a completely non-sexual gesture." I tried to reassure it, but the flush on my cheeks betrayed my embarrassment. ZY Elthara's head tilted again. "Inefficient," it stated flatly, then proceeded to glide into the apartment, its four tentacles swirling gently around itself, seemingly testing the air or, perhaps, sizing up the furniture. I swear one of them gave my antique globe a curious tap as it passed. The apartment, a marvel of adaptive architecture, was designed to accommodate various life forms, but still looked like a typical one-bedroom. It had a central living space, with a small kitchen area, my cluttered desk, and a semicircular seating arrangement, built for human ergonomics but not particularly accommodating for a tentacled alien. There was also a separate, smaller area at the back, designed for more specific climate and environment control needs. The humidity levels in that back area were noticeably higher, with strange, glowing fungi sprouting from the walls. I'd always assumed it was for some obscure, humidity-loving fern, but now, I had a feeling it was meant for ZY Elthara. "Your quarters are adequate," ZY Elthara finally said, its gaze sweeping over my collection of dusty books and half-finished translation projects. "Though the atmospheric humidity is suboptimal. It is also cluttered with several, aesthetically displeasing objects." "Right, well, I'm a translator, not a curator," I quipped, a touch of defensiveness creeping into my voice. "And, it's home." I gestured around the room, trying to project an air of casual comfort I definitely wasn't feeling. Inside, my mind was spinning. A tentacled, glowing alien was living in my apartment. I tried not to think about my last failed dating attempt that involved a very awkward attempt to discuss my love for classical music with someone who was only interested in reality TV. "Efficiency is paramount," ZY Elthara continued, ignoring my subtle attempts to lighten the mood. It glided towards the humid back section of the apartment, its tentacles gracefully maneuvering around my furniture. "This designated area will require additional environmental adjustments." It ran one of its tentacles over the moist, glowing wall, a look of satisfaction on its face. "So, you're a translator, right?" I asked, trying to find some common ground. I knew that there was a need for good alien language translators, so maybe that could be a conversation starter. ZYL turned to face me, its eyes shifting to a vibrant green. I am a specialist in Xylar theoretical linguistics. My designation is not translator. I am also a biophysicist, a systems analyst, and a compatibility data evaluator. I raised an eyebrow, feeling more than a little intimidated. A compatibility data evaluator, huh? So, like a dating expert? The words left my mouth before I could stop them, and I instantly wanted to crawl into a hole. ZYL eyes flickered to a bright, almost neon pink for a moment, before settling back into their cool green. That is an oversimplification, but not inaccurate. I am preparing for the upcoming mating cycle. My research has established the optimal compatibility parameters for a successful pairing. It spoke with the same tone it might use to discuss the optimal temperature for brewing tea. Right, mating cycle, I repeated slowly, trying to process this information. Is that, like, a big deal for you guys? I added, suddenly wondering if this meant the whole building would be filled with tentacled lovebirds soon. My life was officially weird. It is of utmost importance. The continuation of our species requires precise selection and optimal genetic compatibility. ZYL paused, its eyes scanning me again, this time with an almost analytical gaze. You are a human male, correct? Yes? I replied, feeling like a specimen in a lab. Last time I checked, anyway. Your pheromonal signature is interesting, but highly inconsistent. It finished with a slightly judgmental tilt of its head before it turned back to the glowing wall. I will need to adjust the parameters for optimal humidity. I stood there, dumbfounded, feeling both bewildered and strangely fascinated. This was going to be an interesting few weeks. Or maybe a very awkward few weeks. Maybe both. And perhaps slightly disturbing if the mating cycle involved more pheromonal analysis. My new roommate, the tentacled biophysicist and compatibility data evaluator, was definitely going to be a challenge. I could only hope that she didn't have a checklist for optimal apartment etiquette, or I was in serious trouble. The only thing I knew for sure at that point was that my quiet, predictable life had just taken a sharp turn into the bizarre. The image of my outstretched hand, still feeling slightly clammy, lingered in my mind. This was definitely going to be different. And a little bit exciting, in an utterly terrifying kind of way. The chapter ends with the sound of ZYL tentacles adjusting some machinery, a low hum filling the room as the humidity levels began to rise. I just stood there, trying to process it all, with my hand still feeling awkwardly empty. The next morning, the apartment felt different. For one, it was significantly more humid, to the point where my glasses were constantly fogging up. For two, a complex array of sensors and monitors had sprouted overnight in the back area, blinking and whirring with an almost unsettling efficiency. And for three, ZYL was meticulously arranging a series of data pads on the living room table, her four tentacles working in perfect synchronization. Good morning? I ventured, stepping into the living room with a towel wrapped around my head, trying to dry my perpetually damp hair. Looks like you've been busy. I was trying to sound casual, but inside I was feeling slightly overwhelmed by the sudden transformation of my living space into a high-tech laboratory. ZYL looked up, her eyes a calm shade of blue. The environmental adjustments are progressing as expected. And yes, I have been preparing for the preliminary phases of the mating cycle. She gestured to the data pads. This is the initial analysis of potential mates. Right, the mating thing, I said, pouring myself a cup of overly strong, overly caffeinated coffee. So, how does that work, exactly? Is it, like, a cosmic dating app? Or more of a speed dating situation? My attempts at levity were not really landing, but I couldn't help myself. ZYL head tilted slightly. It is not comparable to your rudimentary human mating rituals. The Xylar process is based on precise calculations of pheromonal compatibility, genetic predispositions, and intellectual synergies. It is a highly scientific and logical undertaking. Sounds efficient, I managed, taking a sip of my coffee, which nearly burned my tongue. So, you've got some, candidates. I tried to sound nonchalant, but a strange, unidentifiable feeling stirred in my chest. It felt strangely similar to jealousy, but that was ridiculous. The initial analysis indicates 12 potential candidates. Their data is currently being reviewed. ZYL Thara picked up one of the data pads, the screen displaying a complex graph that looked like a cross between a spiderweb and a DNA sequence. This individual, for example, has a high pheromonal compatibility score but is lacking in intellectual synergy. I leaned closer, trying to make sense of the data. So, it's like a scorecard for potential mates? I asked, feeling like I was reading the results of some bizarre space-based personality test. Precisely, ZYL Thara replied, her eyes focusing on the screen. Each variable is assigned a weighted value. The optimal mate will have the highest cumulative score. This reduces the potential for unsuitable pairings and ensures the healthy propagation of our species. And, where do feelings fit into all of this? I asked, before I could stop myself. The human concept of love was obviously completely alien to her. And the alien concept of a mating cycle was completely alien to me. ZYL Thara paused, her eyes shifting to a deep purple, a color I was starting to learn meant she was thinking. Feelings are a variable, but not a primary one. Emotional responses are often irrational and unpredictable, and therefore, of limited value in the mating process. The primary objective is successful reproduction. I had to bite back a laugh. So, no romantic dinners and long walks on the beach, then? The thought of a Xylar trying to woo a mate with flowers seemed almost comical. Those activities are an inefficient expenditure of resources and time, she said, returning her attention to her data pad. However, certain biochemical stimuli may be present during the pairing phase, leading to hormonal fluctuations in both individuals. But these are simply predictable physical responses, not what you refer to as feelings. I sighed, feeling a bit deflated. I guess my romantic notions of love were just that, notions. I decided to change the subject, trying to find a connection with her. So, you mentioned you were a biophysicist. I'm actually quite interested in old languages. I'm working on some translations of an old Terran dialect at the moment, and I have some linguistic questions I could use some help with. I decided to change the topic and tried to use the fact that I am a professional translator to my advantage. ZYL Thara's eye shifted to a curious orange. Extinct languages? You find value in the study of such inefficient communication systems? Well, yes, I replied, trying to explain my passion for the subject. They offer a window into the past, into different cultures and ways of thinking. Some of them even have these amazing metaphors and idioms, which are almost like poetic codes. And it's not all about efficiency, sometimes, inefficiency is beautiful. I could feel myself getting carried away with my explanation, but she was actually listening. ZYL Thara processed my words. Interesting. I have encountered several records of human linguistic patterns, some with surprisingly complex and abstract structures. Your current project is of a Terran dialect, you said? Which one? It's a very old Sumerian text, I said, feeling slightly proud of my linguistic prowess. I'm trying to decipher some of the metaphors and allegories, which are proving to be quite tricky. I may be able to assist. My database includes a comprehensive analysis of Terran languages. She tapped her tentacle on the table, her focus suddenly shifting to me. This old text, does it contain the concept of love, as you mentioned earlier? Yes, it does, I replied, feeling a strange mixture of anticipation and embarrassment. In fact, this particular text is a love poem. It talks about longing, desire, devotion. I trailed off, realizing I was probably sharing way too much with an alien who didn't even believe in feelings. ZYL Thara's eye shifted to a bright, almost neon pink, for a brief moment, before going back to a neutral blue. Intriguing. I will need to study this in detail. Perhaps you can show me the text. We spent the rest of the afternoon hunched over my ancient Sumerian text, ZYL Thara's tentacles deftly manipulating the digital translations, while I tried to explain the nuances of ancient metaphors. She was, without a doubt, the most logical, efficient translator I'd ever worked with. And also, the most intriguing. I noticed a slight shift in her pheromones, something I only picked up when I got closer, something almost floral. My mind went into overdrive. Why was I noticing her pheromones, anyway? At one point, she paused, her eyes turning a bright green. This phrase, "My heart beats for you." What is the physiological basis of this statement? Does the heart physically accelerate its rhythm when it encounters the object of desire? Well, yes, I replied, a bit flustered by her directness. It's a metaphor, but it's also a real physical response. Your heart rate goes up, you feel nervous, maybe a little sweaty. It's complicated. I tried to describe the physical symptoms of romantic feelings, but it all sounded a bit ridiculous, now that I was saying it out loud. ZYL Thara seemed to process this information, her eyes changing to a thoughtful amber. Fascinating. I will need to include this in my analysis of human mating behaviors. Later, as I was trying to make a simple pasta dinner, which now felt like I was cooking in a sauna, ZYL Thara approached me, a data pad in hand. The analysis is complete, she announced. The top candidate is an Xyla designated as Tharax. He has a 98% compatibility score. She showed me a picture of a very tall, very serious-looking Xyla with 6 tentacles and an expression that suggested he had never cracked a smile in his life. My stomach did a weird flip. He looks very compatible, I said, trying to sound as neutral as possible. Inside, I was having a strange emotional response I couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was just the humidity. Indeed. He meets all the required parameters for a successful pairing. ZYL Thara turned to me, her eyes a cool blue. I require additional data. In the course of our study of this Terran dialect, I noticed that you express significant emotional responses. I need to include you in my initial pheromonal study. Me? I asked, my voice cracking slightly. Affirmative. It's purely for data collection. There is no risk. I simply need to measure your responses to specific stimuli. Prepare for the analysis. ZYL Thara's tone was completely matter-of-fact, as if she were requesting the results of some routine blood test. She approached me, and I could see the small sensors on her tentacles that she was about to use. I could also notice a hint of some kind of excitement in her usually emotionless face. It was so subtle that I could be imagining things, but my heart started to beat faster. My heart, like I said before, was also behaving like a highly illogical and unpredictable organ. The end of this chapter definitely felt like a cliffhanger. And I was not sure what to expect. The chapter ends with ZYL Thara's tentacle reaching out to my arm, a small sensor glowing softly as it made contact with my skin. My heart was definitely not behaving in an efficient way. The sensor on ZYL Thara's tentacle felt strangely warm against my skin, not at all like the cold, clinical device I expected. My heart did that weird, erratic flutter again, the one I was starting to recognize as a sign of either extreme embarrassment or impending doom, possibly both. ZYL Thara's eyes, a deep, analytical blue, were fixed on the small readings on the data pad she held in her other tentacle. Your pheromonal output is inconsistent, she stated, her voice devoid of any inflection. It fluctuates significantly in response to various stimuli, which makes the analysis challenging. Is that a bad thing? I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out slightly higher pitched than usual. I was acutely aware of the way her tentacle was gently pressing against my arm, a sensation that was both unnerving and strangely pleasant. It is atypical. Xyla pheromonal responses are generally predictable and consistent. Your readings indicate a wide range of fluctuations, including elevated levels of curiosity, nervousness, and what appears to be a mild attraction. She paused, her eye shifting to a brief shade of pink before going back to blue. The data suggests that your emotional responses are not entirely random, but are in direct relation to my proximity and also the content of our discussions. Specifically, that love poem and our discussion of biological responses to the notion of love. I swallowed hard. Attraction? Well, that's interesting data, I stammered. My brain was struggling to process the fact that a tentacled alien was analyzing my attraction to her as if it were a science experiment. And what is even more crazy is that she seemed interested in my human biological responses. ZY-Elthara's eyes narrowed slightly, though her expression remained unchanged. I must clarify, this data collection is strictly for scientific purposes. I am evaluating your responses as a sample within the spectrum of human behavior, not as a personal endorsement. She removed the sensor from my arm. The data will be added to my overall research. Of course, I said, trying to regain my composure. But my mind was racing. Attraction? Mild attraction? My mild attraction? To ZY-Elthara? That was unexpected. And not entirely unwelcome. Which was, in itself, quite terrifying. The next few days passed in a blur of shared meals, awkward conversations, and intense linguistic analysis. ZY-Elthara continued her preparations for the mating cycle, meticulously reviewing data and making adjustments to her pheromonal output, while I continued to fumble through ancient Sumerian texts. The apartment was now a chaotic mix of alien technology and my usual clutter, with the added bonus of perpetually damp air and the lingering scent of some strange, floral pheromones. One evening, while I was attempting to explain the concept of metaphorical heartbreak, ZY-Elthara paused, her eye shifting to a curious shade of orange. This concept of heartbreak, it is a physical ailment, then? Does the heart literally fracture? No, not literally, I replied, trying to suppress a laugh. It's just a way of describing the feeling of emotional pain when a relationship ends. It's like a deep ache in your chest, a feeling of loss and sadness. ZY-Elthara stared at me for a moment, processing my words. Illogical. Why would humans intentionally subject themselves to such an unpleasant sensation? Well, the hope of finding true love is worth it, I suppose, I said, trying to inject some enthusiasm into my explanation. The good parts of a relationship can be amazing, you know, the shared experiences, the feeling of closeness, the companionship. I was suddenly aware of how much I was talking. ZY-Elthara remained silent for a few moments, her eyes shifting to a deep purple, the color I now knew meant she was doing some complex mental processing. These concepts, they are contrary to the logic of Xylar mating cycles. Our species' focus is on efficiency and reproductive success. There is no concept of shared experiences or closeness. However, I find myself noticing them in you more often. And I cannot explain this behavior. I felt a strange surge of something. Hope? Maybe even something akin to excitement? Well, maybe there's more to relationships than just efficiency, I said, unable to suppress a smile. I was starting to enjoy the fact that she could be at least confused by some concepts of the human culture. The day of the first social gathering for potential mates was approaching, and ZY-Elthara started to spend more time adjusting her pheromonal output. I found myself more interested in her, and her subtle changes in emotion than my linguistic studies. I realized I was no longer trying to be logical and collected around her. The thought of her being with Tharax, the humorless Xylar from the data pad, was starting to make me unreasonably jealous. Which, I knew, was a very irrational, human thing to feel. One evening, I decided to try a completely unorthodox approach. I went to a small flower shop in the complex, a quirky little place run by an elderly human woman who had a knack for growing almost any plant. I picked out a bouquet of brightly colored flowers, a mix of blues, purples, and a few vibrant oranges. I knew that this was not something Xylar would do, but I could not help but do it anyway. "These are for you," I said, holding out the bouquet to ZY-Elthara. She was studying some data pad, with her head titled in a way that I now found completely charming. ZY-Elthara looked at the flowers, her eyes shifting to a bewildered shade of green. "What is the purpose of these brightly colored vegetative structures? Are they a form of sustenance?" Or perhaps a tool for manipulating the environment? No, they're flowers, I explained, feeling a bit foolish. They're a gift. A gesture of affection. I realized that she probably did not understand that concept. Zyl took the bouquet, her tentacles gingerly touching the petals. Affection? You are suggesting that the exchange of these organic structures will somehow enhance our relationship? Well, yes, it's a symbol of caring. I tried to explain, but I knew that I was not doing a good job. It means I like you, and I wanted to do something nice for you. Zyl examined the flowers with a puzzled expression. They are visually pleasing, but their biological function is limited, and they will decompose. An inefficient expenditure of resources. She paused, her eyes shifting to a sudden, bright shade of pink. I appreciate the gesture. But I fail to see the practical application of this symbolic exchange. She was trying hard to understand, and somehow, that made my heart skip a beat. It's okay, you don't have to understand, I said, feeling a strange mix of amusement and affection. Maybe just try to enjoy them. Later that night, as I was trying to fall asleep, I could hear Zyl moving about in her humidified section of the apartment. I could see the glow of her monitors, and the gentle swaying of her tentacles. I had a strange urge to go there and talk to her. I was completely out of my mind. The apartment was strangely quiet, with only the hum of the humidity system and the rhythmic beeps of Zyl's equipment as a constant hum. I closed my eyes, the image of Zyl's confused expression, the bewildered look in her beautiful eyes, imprinted on my mind. My brain started to wonder what it would be like to kiss her. That thought made my heart beat faster, as my face turned slightly hot. I was in big trouble. Suddenly, there was a loud sputtering noise, followed by a series of frantic beeps. I sat up quickly in bed, realizing that something was not right. The humidity system, the complex machine that Zyl relied on, was failing. I could hear Zyl making a series of panicked noises. I jumped out of bed and ran into her section of the apartment. The air was already starting to dry out, and I could see that Zyl was clearly distressed. Her skin was losing its vibrant glow, and her movements were becoming sluggish. The data pads were flashing warning messages. The system, it is failing, she said, her voice now strained and weak. The atmospheric regulation, it is not adequate. Without thinking, I reached out and put my arms around her, holding her tightly. I had no idea what to do, but I knew I had to comfort her. She was trembling, her tentacles wrapped tightly around herself. And then it happened. As I was holding her close, I noticed a change in Zyl. Her skin started to glow, her iridescent hues shifting into a complex spectrum of greens, purples, and a vibrant, almost shocking pink. Her pheromones started to bloom, a wave of a floral, almost intoxicating, scent. She buried her face in my chest, and the soft, subtle pheromonal change that I had picked up before, intensified tenfold. This was not a normal pheromonal fluctuation. This was a very specific reaction. Something I was causing. The chapter ends with me holding Zyl tightly, her soft, cool skin pressed against mine, as she made a series of soft, almost confused sounds. I had no idea what was happening, but I knew that things had just taken a turn from awkward to very, very strange. And also, strangely, exciting. The feel of Zyl's soft, cool skin against mine was, well, it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was like holding a living, breathing, iridescent gemstone, one that was currently emitting a bewildering array of colors and pheromonal signals. She was pressed tightly against me, her tentacles twitching slightly, her breathing rapid and shallow. The room was filled with the scent of her blooming pheromones, a heady, almost intoxicating floral fragrance that seemed to be scrambling my senses. Zyl? I whispered, my voice sounding a bit hoarse. Are you okay? I had no idea what was happening, but I knew that the malfunction in the humidity system had caused some kind of drastic reaction in her. She pulled back slightly, her eyes a swirling kaleidoscope of greens, purples, and pinks. The pheromonal cascade, it is unexpected, she stammered, her voice now weaker and slightly trembling. The physical contact, it triggered a biological response. The data, it does not correlate. She was clearly struggling to process what was happening to her. Okay, deep breaths, I said, trying to keep my own panic at bay. This whole situation was quickly spiraling out of control, and I needed to figure out how to help her. We need to fix the humidity system. Can you tell me what's wrong? ZY-Elthara's tentacles, still trembling slightly, reached out and tapped at the malfunctioning control panel. The primary regulator, it has failed. The backup system, it is also compromised. The manual override, it requires a specific code sequence, but I do not have the exact sequence. I swallowed hard, the sudden rush of adrenaline making me feel a little less confused. Okay, a code sequence. Can you tell me what languages you have available? The system includes several Terran languages from multiple eras. It was designed for emergency situations, ZY-Elthara replied, her eyes now a deep shade of indigo, as she was processing the information in her mind. Right, I said, my mind racing. I remembered seeing some old, dusty schematics in my collection of ancient Terran technical manuals. Do you have access to some very old Terran schematics? Some old systems from the early days of space exploration? I may have some old translations that could help. I quickly turned and went to my room, frantically pulling out some old books from my shelves. ZY-Elthara followed me with her gaze, a mixture of curiosity and something that might have been a tiny bit of hope. I quickly found the relevant manual, its pages yellowed and brittle with age. I have the instructions here, I said, pointing at some diagrams. The code sequence is hidden in the old system descriptions, which were translated in a very old form of German. I can translate it for you. ZY-Elthara's eyes widened slightly, her tentacles moving with renewed purpose as she helped me set up the portable translator. Your linguistic skills, they are more than what was expected. And also, these old systems, the level of their engineering is fascinating. Working together, we managed to decipher the code sequence, my translation skills proving invaluable. ZY-Elthara, with her detailed knowledge of the system, quickly input the code, and after a few tense moments, the humidity system whirred back to life. The air in the room gradually became more humid, and I could see ZY-Elthara's iridescent skin regaining its vibrant glow. The system, it is operational, she said, her voice now stronger, and with a note of relief. Your translation, it was crucial. She looked at me, her eyes now a calmer shade of green. And your actions to protect me, also unexpected. Well, you know, that's what humans do, I said with a shrug, trying to hide the fact that my heart was still doing that weird, erratic dance in my chest. We're surprisingly good at fixing stuff when it involves someone we care about. She paused, her eyes narrowed slightly. Care about? Is that another one of your illogical emotional responses? Maybe, I said, unable to suppress a smile. Maybe it is. The mating cycle was now in full swing, and the entire complex was buzzing with activity. Xylars were pairing off, following their complex, data-driven protocols. ZY-Elthara, however, was still with me, her pheromonal output still a chaotic mix of floral scents and unexpected fluctuations. The image of her soft skin pressed against mine, and the strange, unexplainable feelings I had for her, were making my heart beat faster. And that was not good for my health. The social gathering for the mating cycle is starting. I must go, ZY-Elthara said, as she was adjusting her tentacles in front of the mirror. Her eyes, now a calmer shade of blue, looked uncertain for the first time. I need to proceed with my evaluation. Okay, I said, trying to sound casual, but my heart was sinking. Good luck with the compatibility thing. She turned to look at me, a curious expression on her face. You are not bothered? That I am evaluating other potential mates? Of course not, I said, trying to hide the wave of jealousy I was feeling. I mean, it's all logical, right? Data and compatibility and all that stuff. ZY Elthara seemed to consider my words for a moment. Your responses continue to be atypical. And your biological data, it has been showing unexpected changes since I held you close last night. There is something different. Well, I guess we're just a bunch of illogical humans, aren't we? I said, trying to keep the mood light, but inside, I was feeling miserable. The thought of her being with another Xylar was making me feel, well, like my heart was literally breaking. ZY Elthara left the apartment, and I sat on my couch, feeling utterly dejected. I was falling for a tentacled alien who didn't believe in feelings. And she was going to a mating party to find a more compatible partner, which was, logically, what she should be doing. I felt like an idiot. The social gathering was held in the complex's central hall, a vast space designed to accommodate multiple species. I decided to go there myself, out of pure curiosity. I wanted to see what a Xylar mating ritual looked like. I found a spot where I could observe without being noticed. The scene was a kaleidoscope of iridescent colors, with Xylars mingling and interacting in their usual precise and calculated manner. I saw ZY Elthara talking to Tharax, the humorless Xylar from the data pad. They were standing close to each other, and I noticed a slight shift in their pheromones. My stomach did a weird flip. I really hated that logical Xylar. I could also see other aliens staring at ZY Elthara because she was behaving in an unusual way for a Xylar. Suddenly, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was one of my friends from the complex, a kind, quirky human woman named Sarah, who always gave me very strange advice. "You okay, Ben?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I lied, but Sarah wasn't buying it. "Oh, please," she said, rolling her eyes. "I can practically smell your jealousy from here. You're totally smitten with that tentacled beauty, aren't you?" I sighed, knowing that there was no point in denying it. "Okay, maybe a little," I admitted. "Well, go get her, Tiger," Sarah said with a grin. "Don't let some data-obsessed alien steal your girl." "But it's all based on logic and compatibility," I said, feeling completely defeated. "Oh, please," Sarah said, nudging me with her elbow. "Love is never logical. It's messy and irrational and completely wonderful. So go be messy and irrational. Or at least try to be." Taking a deep breath, I decided to be messy and irrational. I went over to ZY Elthara and Tharax, feeling my heart beat like crazy. Tharax was saying something very boring and serious, and ZY Elthara looked completely unfocused. "Excuse me," I said, interrupting their conversation. "ZY Elthara, can I have a word?" ZY Elthara turned to me, her eyes widening slightly. Her eyes went from a neutral, calm green to a deep, almost shocked pink, and then to a chaotic mix of colors I could not even name. Her pheromones surged, filling the room with that heady, floral scent that was now almost exclusively associated with me. "What is the meaning of this?" Tharax asked, his voice as monotone and dull as I expected. "You are interrupting my conversation with ZY Elthara. Such behavior is illogical and disruptive." "I don't care about illogical or disruptive," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I need to talk to ZY Elthara, and she needs to be with me." I couldn't believe I was saying this. I sounded like a character in a really bad romantic movie. ZY Elthara, who was now emitting an even more complex pheromonal display, just stared at me. Her skin was shifting through multiple colors, her tentacles trembling slightly. She looked confused, and also, strangely, very, very beautiful. And then, something completely unexpected happened. ZY Elthara took a deep breath, and let out a series of sounds, noises that sounded like a mix of a frustrated sigh and a series of beeps and whistles. Her body was glowing, shimmering, and shifting through multiple colors, creating a rainbow effect that was both beautiful and completely chaotic. The Xylar around us stopped their conversations to stare at her. She was having a full public emotional display, something very unusual and completely unexpected from her. The chapter ends with the entire complex staring at ZY Elthara, who was now making a series of very Xylar noises, her skin glowing like a disco ball, and her pheromones creating a cloud of scent that even I found completely overwhelming. Her display was an unexpected climax to the mating cycle, and I was at the center of it. The silence that followed ZY-Elthara's unexpected display was deafening. Every Xylar in the complex was staring at her, their usual calm, logical expressions replaced with something akin to shock. Even Tharax looked genuinely perplexed, his 6 tentacles twitching slightly, his normally dull eyes wide with surprise. ZY-Elthara, however, was still glowing like a sentient disco ball, her pheromones creating a heady, almost intoxicating cloud around her. The floral scent was so intense, I could practically taste it. What was that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, and I felt like I had just witnessed a supernova of emotions. ZY-Elthara took a deep breath, her skin slowly shifting back to a more muted, though still vibrant, shade of green. That was an emotional response. An uncontrolled, illogical expression of distress, confusion, and, I believe, a strong preference. Her voice was still slightly shaky, but she managed to maintain a semblance of her usual composure. Preference? I asked, raising an eyebrow. My heart was doing that weird, erratic dance again, but now there was an added layer of hope. Affirmative. The data analysis is now clear. My affinity is with you, Ben. She stated this with a directness that was both incredibly awkward and surprisingly endearing. She didn't even try to use metaphors anymore. She was as direct as a Xylar could be. Tharax cleared his throat, his expression one of utter bewilderment. This is unacceptable. The data clearly indicated that I was the optimal match. Your behavior is illogical and inconsistent with all established protocols. ZY-Elthara turned to face him, her eyes now a determined shade of amber. The established protocols have proven to be inadequate. The human concepts of emotional bonds and affection, they are not fully accounted for in our data. She paused, her tentacles twitching slightly. My choice is final. She looked at me with those beautiful eyes, and my heart just melted. So, you're choosing me? I asked, my voice cracking slightly. I couldn't believe this was actually happening. A tentacled, data-driven alien was choosing me over logic and compatibility. Affirmative, ZY-Elthara said, her voice still precise, but with a hint of something that might have been excitement. Or perhaps it was just the lingering pheromonal overload. You are my preferred partner. She walked to me, and I could feel those sensors on her tentacles getting closer, but this time, I wasn't afraid. Actually, I was very, very excited. The other Xylars in the complex started to murmur, their confusion palpable. They were clearly struggling to comprehend the situation. One of them even fainted. The social gathering, which was supposed to be a carefully orchestrated mating ritual, had devolved into a chaotic mess of emotions and unexpected preferences. So, what happens now? I asked, my mind still trying to catch up with the events of the last few minutes. ZY-Elthara turned to me, her eyes now a soft, almost luminous green. Now, we explore the parameters of this unorthodox partnership. We will establish new protocols for interspecies bonding. And we will learn to understand each other. She paused, her tentacles moving with a newfound sense of purpose. And perhaps, we will continue to translate that Terran love poem. I'd like that very much, I said, my heart soaring. I couldn't believe that I was going to have a relationship with a tentacled, data-driven alien who was just as confused and excited as I was. This was definitely not how I imagined my life would turn out. We spent the next few days trying to figure out how to make our relationship work. It was a chaotic, sometimes awkward, but always fascinating process. I tried to explain the human concepts of dates, romantic gestures, and emotional intimacy, while ZY-Elthara tried to explain the intricacies of Xylar biology, mating cycles, and the importance of efficient data analysis. We experimented with new forms of communication, trying to bridge the gap between our two cultures. I learned to interpret her subtle shifts in color and pheromones, while she started to recognize my various facial expressions and emotional cues. I took her on a date to the complex's botanical garden, a place she found both baffling and intriguing. She tried to give me a detailed analysis of my pheromonal output during the date, which was both incredibly awkward and kind of cute. One evening, while we were translating more of the ancient Sumerian love poem, ZYL Thara paused, her eyes a thoughtful shade of amber. This concept of soulmates, it is a very illogical idea. But I find that my analysis of your data indicates a very high compatibility in many areas. And also, the pheromonal reaction I have around you is very strong. The strongest response I have ever registered. There is something more than just data. Maybe that something more is love? I suggested, unable to suppress a smile. ZYL Thara turned to me, her eyes shifting to a soft, luminous pink. Perhaps. Or perhaps it is something beyond the logic I can understand. Maybe it is a mystery worth exploring. The other aliens in the complex were still processing our relationship, many of them bewildered by our unorthodox approach to interspecies bonding. Some of them found us strange, but some of them were also intrigued. We were definitely the talk of the town, a constant source of gossip and fascination. And we were also a source of hope, proof that love could transcend cultural and biological boundaries. We also faced some social challenges, as other aliens and humans struggled to understand the nature of our relationship. Some aliens considered our behavior to be disruptive and illogical, while some humans found it difficult to accept that I was dating a tentacled alien. However, we were able to resolve these issues, demonstrating our commitment to communication, cultural exchange, and a shared understanding. One day, ZYL Thara came to me with a data pad, her eyes a mix of excitement and curiosity. I have found a solution to the humidity problem. I used the old human design that you translated for me. And I have also made some modifications with my own data, and created a new, better design. She looked at me with pride, and for the first time, I could see that there was something else there, a true affection. I knew you could do it, I said, my heart swelling with affection. You're amazing, ZYL Thara. ZYL Thara's eye shifted to a soft pink, and her tentacles reached out to gently touch my face. And you, Ben, are unique. And despite all the odds, you are also my preferred partner. She paused for a moment, before adding something new, I love you. My heart skipped a beat. I love you too, ZYL Thara, I said, my voice filled with emotion. This tentacled, logical, data-driven alien had captured my heart, and I had captured hers. It was a messy, irrational, completely wonderful situation. The chapter ends with ZYL Thara leaning in for a kiss, her soft, cool lips meeting mine, her tentacles gently caressing my face. Our relationship was far from perfect, full of awkward moments, cultural clashes, and unexpected emotions. But it was ours. And it was a beautiful, hilarious, and utterly unique adventure. We were an example of how love can transcend all boundaries, even the ones that seemed completely logical. And I wouldn't have it any other way.